before we jump into today's episode, if you haven't already, go check out Ostrich. We're all about improving your financial literacy, financial well-being, and helping you get to where you want to be financially. And we've actually rolled out a really cool program that I'm excited to announce. It's called Shares for Shares. And we're actually giving away shares of stock in our company for sharing our network and helping grow the network. So go to getostrich.com, sign up, start sharing, and you can earn a limited number of referral shares that we've got available. Hello, and welcome to the Silicon Alley Podcast. Super excited you could join me today. I'm William Glass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and of course, your host of the Silicon Alley Podcast. Now, on the Silicon Alley Podcast, I talk to entrepreneurs and top performers to understand what it truly takes to grow and scale a business. You'll get actionable advice that you can apply in your own business and life. Now, on today's episode, I sit down with Jay Webb, founder of the J. David Group. Before I jump into his background, though, and why I'm so excited for today's episode, if you have not already, subscribe and follow the podcast so you get notified when a new episode drops every Friday. And if you hear something you like, share the podcast on social media or with others who you think would get value. So my guest today, Jay Webb, is the founder of the J. David Group, which helps rapidly growing software companies hire sales leaders and salespeople. He's also the host of Over Quota, which is a podcast that features his exclusive interviews with CEOs, sales leaders, and top enterprise software salespeople about the keys to their success and what, in their opinions, separates the best salespeople from everybody else. Now, I actually sat down with Jay a few weeks ago to discuss my experience as an individual contributor and quick rise into sales leadership, as well as growing and scaling Ostrich. It was a lot of fun, and now I get to flip the script. And what I love about today's conversation is Jay goes deep into what motivates him, from being dead set on being in the NBA to get the attention of his father, actually, to unbossing himself so no one could tell him what to do, and his approach to learning, as well as his motto, having an allergic reaction to inaction. So I hope that you enjoy today's conversation with Jay Webb. It's a ton of fun, and please drop a review and share the podcast with others. Thanks so much, and let's get to it. You got no time to waste, but still you hesitate, caught in a circle saying I'll never leave this place. All right, Jay, welcome to the Silicon Alley Podcast. Super excited to have you on and hear a little bit more about your story.
Absolutely. I'm excited to do this. I'm usually on the other side of this. So this is exciting and interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So Jay hosts a podcast called Over Quota that's focused on sales leaders, individual contributors, and specifically within technology. And Jay was nice enough to let me get on there and have the mic on his podcast and dive into my experience. And it's fun that I get to flip the roles and get to hop on the other side of the mic with you.
That's right. Flip the roles. That's right.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, Jay, why don't you give the audience a little bit of background? Because you weren't always an entrepreneur, and Over Quota sales obviously is a big part of your journey, but take us back. Who is Jay, and kind of what's your early career trajectory look like?
So when I was in college, the only thing that I wanted to do once I realized, frankly, going into college, that I wasn't going to be in the NBA, because I always wanted to be a professional athlete, and I was serious about that, right? Like I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, shoot 500 jump shots. I'd pay one of my friends a penny to rebound for me, like a penny a ball, to rebound for me. And I don't think I ever gave him those 500 pennies, to be honest with you. But like at one point, going into my sophomore year in college, my mother, she'd moved to Dallas. I'm from Boston, but she'd moved to Dallas, or Fort Worth, I should say, Texas, during that time. And so I was there for the summertime, and I didn't make the team my freshman year, but it was a scholarship team. It was Division II, certainly not Division I, but I worked my butt off. I remember it was like 110 degrees out, and she lived in this apartment complex where, there was a basketball court there, and I'd be out there all day. So I was like serious about, like, I did not want to work for a living. I was trying everything I could to not work for a living. The only work I wanted to do was work on the court. And so just to back up for a second, like growing up, that's what I did. Like my work ethic was all about like sports, whether it was football, basketball, baseball, the whole 9 yards. And the one thing that I didn't do, which I was so thankful for as a kid, is I didn't have jobs. Like I had one job as a paper boy that lasted literally one route. It was literally one Saturday morning. I delivered like, I don't even know how many papers, maybe 100. And then I quit. I was a carriage boy, like basically the people that bring the carriages back to the grocery store,
Yeah.
when somebody pushed them, or at least when they were in the parking lot, you had to sort of put them all back together. Like those are, and that was like a week. That's all I had. Those were like my jobs when I was growing up. Everything. And then I just had like basketball camp, like, you know, just camps. That's what I would do. Right.
Yeah.
So my early career, when I was in college, because I have a right brain, like I just create. I was like, all right, I want to get into advertising. And I want to be like David Ogilvy was like my mentor, or virtual mentor. I want to create like him and eventually start my own. I want to have an ad agency, and I want to create this big ad empire. And so when I had an internship my senior year in college at an ad agency, and I thought this was it. You know, I was on the creative side, the whole 9 yards. They hired me right after college. So graduated on a Sunday, literally walked in there on a Monday. This was 1997, started working. I was only there for a few months because they thought they were going to win an account when they hired me. It was a restaurant. They thought they were going to win it. They didn't win it. And then there I was looking for a job again. So I've always had this entrepreneurial bend to me, because I'd never, like, to my point, I never wanted to work for anybody. I never wanted to have a boss. And I finally found a job at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. And frankly, the reason why I even started working at Enterprise Rent-A-Car was because one of the things they said, they actually were recruiting at my college, my junior year. One of the things that they said that I remembered 2 or 3 years later was that if you come to Enterprise, we will teach you how to run a business. We will teach you about sales, marketing, P&L, management, like you name it, we will teach you. And it always stuck in my head, like, you know what, that sounds like something that I could take advantage of, right? So I did. I went there, started off as an individual, grew, became a manager in 2 years, stayed there for 5 years, and was in various management capacities there. And it taught me, frankly, how to run a business. I knew nothing about managerial accounting. I freaking got like D's in it in college. I was just terrible at it, right? But then like a year in at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, I'm like, oh shit, like, oh, sorry, I don't know if you take the cursing, but it's like, I know I could go back to this class and ace it now, right? Like I understand like what this is all about, right? And so, but even then I was like, okay, at some point, like these bosses that I have, which I had great bosses, but I always had this in my mind, like, you know what, they could make my life miserable. Like these guys have the choice to either, you know, make my life miserable or not. Right now, they're just choosing to make my life not miserable because I have good bosses, right? And that always just bothered me. And I was like, oh, something more I could do, something more I should do. So while I was there, like I said, man, I'm just an entrepreneur at heart. So I started flipping houses while I was there. I bought and sold real estate, probably a lot, but I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 places between 2003 and 2006. Some I held, like some I sold at one point I sold a contract to a house. Matter of fact, that was the impetus for me leaving actually Enterprise, is that I ended up purchasing I wanted to leave Enterprise. I just knew at some point I was just like 7 years in, I'm done. I got to start doing something on my own, right? By the way, I started a magazine in 2001 with a good friend of mine called Chivalry Magazine. So I was doing all these crazy things, right? And then invested in real estate. Still have real estate from way back then. Today I have property in Arkansas. I have a 3-family in Gloucester, Massachusetts. I have a family investment property where I live now. So all those things really were me just trying to figure out, okay, what's my goal? Like how am I going to get to where I want to be? Right. At some point, real estate slowed down and I needed to go work. And all right, so what am I going to do? And for some reason, recruiting spoke to me, right? Being a headhunter spoke to me. Because it's dynamic. Because it wasn't just selling a particular product. It wasn't necessarily, I didn't envision it just sitting behind a desk all day and not really having, you know, rich conversations about stuff that I wasn't interested in. This conversation that we're having here and that I have on my podcast, these are the things that excite me, because in my conversation that I had with you on my podcast, it's dynamic. You're different. I wanted to learn more about you. I figured if I wasn't going to be an entrepreneur, maybe I'd be a psychologist or something, because I'm just so fascinated by people and what made people tick. So to me, sitting here evaluating salespeople as for a career, I can do that, right? Like that's something I can do, right? Almost in a way like holding up a mirror and looking at myself, like what makes me tick, right? Because that's just sort of my DNA, right? Sales is just sort of in me. But then again, because I get it, so I had to go to work. Notice how I said I had to go to work. Right? I had to go report to people, right? One of the things that I've always done though, as a employee, was what I call unboss myself, right?
Okay.
I don't want a boss, so I unboss myself. So what that means is at Enterprise, I would get in the office the office didn't open up until like, I think it was 8. I'd be in there at like 6:30 in the morning. At one point, I didn't leave. I literally slept on a inflatable mattress and just stayed there all night because I wanted to get ahead of what my boss was going to tell me to do. Right? Like I don't
Interesting.
want to be
Yeah.
told what to do. At some point, I'm telling you what to do, right? In other words,
Yeah.
or I'm telling you what I've done, right? So I did that at Enterprise. I did that at the recruiting company that I was working for, where I remember one time I looked at the clock when I got in the office. It was 4:55 a.m. in the morning. And then I'd leave at like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And there was so many reasons why I did that, but I was motivated to, I don't want you saying, hey, Jay, did you make your calls? Hey, Jay, did you do this? I'm like, yep, I did that. Now I'm on to something else. All right. Like, what else you
Yeah.
got for me? And now I can manage up. I can say, hey, you know what? I need help with this. Is there any way you could do this? Like, I'm thinking about this. And I had more credibility because they weren't talking to me about the stuff that they were talking to other people about. Right.
Yeah.
But because I'm so motivated and so just driven to just, get the job done, so to speak, I'm looking around sitting in that office going, okay, so what are the assets that this company is really providing me? Right. And at the end of the day, and I loved them all, right? But at the end of the day, it was a building that I'd have to go to every day. It was the computer that they provided me, the phone that was next to the desk, and they asked me to wear a tie every day. And I said, you know what? Like, I can do this myself because I was on really 100% commission anyways. I was finding my own business. I was finding my own candidates. So I was there for 4 years. I wanted to get my 40,000 hours in, you know what I mean? Make sure I was an expert.
Yeah.
And then it was, right, it was Malcolm Gladwell. And then it was time to go, right? And then, so I went and started the J. David Group in 2011.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. So there's a theme that you mentioned throughout, whether it was, when you're going to be in the NBA or, at Enterprise, there's this drive. Like, where does that drive come from? Because it's clear that like you're motivated to be successful, whatever it is that you're focused on. Where do you think that drive comes from?
It's very simple, I think, because I am so introspective. It's that my parents got a divorce when I was 5, right? So this was 1980.
Okay.
I remember very distinctly sitting down with them at the breakfast table. And for some reason, I've always been motivated by money. Maybe because my mother was watching Dallas and Falcon Crest, which are these like late night soap operas, and all of them were rich on TV. And she would admire the homes and stuff that they were. And I would too. I'm looking, going, wow, these things are like beautiful homes. And look at these people going, they're wearing their suits and whatnot. But at the same time, I didn't want to work. And then I loved sports. So I remember asking them when I was 5, I'm like, or maybe it was before. Yeah, I think my father would come to visit, like the weekend visitation, right, to something like that. And I was like, well, who makes the most money in sports? Like baseball, basketball, football. And at the time, it was basketball. I think frankly, it still is.
Yeah.
So they were like basketball. And that was it. I was driven, right? That's what I was going to do. But most importantly, to get to the psychology of my motivation, it was I wanted my dad to freaking like pay attention, like to notice me, right? Like if I could like make something of myself, if I could be big, right, in this world. He wasn't too far away, at least not in the beginning. He ended up moving really far when I was 11. But in the beginning, it was, several miles, right? But wasn't necessarily like there all the time. Like I'd be waiting at the back door for him to come on Saturdays. He wouldn't show up. I'm like, oh, like where's, my mother's like, oh no, he's not coming if he doesn't come after a certain time. So I was really driven by like, all right, I got to make something of myself so I can like get his attention. Right. And I didn't realize that at the time. I think as I became an adult and looking back at it, I'm going, like that's what it was. Right. Like I really wanted to get his attention. And I figured if I became a professional basketball player, oh boy, would I have his attention. Because that's what he wanted to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'd be like, yeah, Dad, like, yeah, see, I did it. Right. So I think that's where it all comes from. And the funny thing is that I noticed that I don't even know how many years ago, right? It doesn't leave though, right? In other words, it's like, oh, okay, that's why I'm motivated. No, I'm not motivated anymore because I'm not worried about that part anymore. Like, which I'm not. I'm a dad. Like I got, all this other great stuff going on, but it just doesn't leave, right? I think it's kind of like a habit, right? It ends up getting baked in to you and it just doesn't stop unless you actually are actively going to work to turn it off, right? But I don't want to turn it off. Like I'm motivated for all different types of, I'm motivated in different reasons now, but that's why from the beginning, why I wanted to be successful.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And, I love the fact that you've taken the time to like really introspect and figure out what it is that drives you, because I don't think enough people do that. So how did you you said it took you some time to figure that out. Like, what was the process for you to figure out that was your drive and motivation? And like, yeah, talk about that a little bit.
It's a good question. I don't know what the process was. I think I've always felt like, I remember in college, I wrote this rap that started with, "I'll analyze life until I die, till I meet the deceased who got shot by the peace." I don't know.
Okay.
And the reason why that line starts off that way is because I'm always just analyzing stuff, right? I'm always just like
Okay.
looking at life at a different angle, almost like I'm watching myself. I remember even telling my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and we've been together for close to 20 years, is that, like, I always envisioned myself being on 60 Minutes and them interviewing me, and then, or me and going back to, my childhood home or something like that, or
Yeah.
or the start of a book starts off like the start of my book starts off with, that I haven't written yet, starts off with, I always felt like I was different, right?
Okay.
And there's this thing that, as I started going through life, and I just started thinking about, like, why do you do the things that you do? Like, why? And probably, now that I think about it, it's probably at like your worst moments, right? It's like the darkest sort of times where something
Yeah.
wrong happened financially or something like that. And you going, "Oh shit, like, well, what is it? Like, why?" Like,
Yeah.
I look at like people in my family or people that I know who are the opposite, just flat out not motivated at all. But there's no real, like, you know, pressure there, right? It's kind of like, I'm looking going, "You know what? Maybe that's not a bad way to be." You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, there's no, like, it's cool, right? They just get up, they do the thing, start the day, they end the day, and the next day it's the same, and that's just it, right? So I think during those times, I probably thought, like, okay, like, what's really going on here? Like, why
Yeah.
are you so motivated? And that's what I come up with.
Gotcha. No, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And what's interesting is that the entrepreneurial piece came in the fact that you were really driven to be successful, but you didn't really want anyone telling you what to do. Like the paper route that lasted a day, the grocery store, the cart buggy job that lasted a week. And obviously what eventually led you to leave Enterprise and also to start J. David Group. So like, what about that piece of it? Like when you think about your entrepreneurial spirit, like where does that play into your story, and specifically, like how has it impacted you?
The thing about not wanting to be told what to do is, there's this word freedom that just it's like a motif in my life, right?
Okay.
Like, I've got to be free.
Yeah.
Like, my universal symbol is the bald eagle. Well, I guess it's the bald eagle. It's the right. I mean, think about it. It's our country, right? It's
Yeah.
the big symbol. It's the symbol of the United States, right? And it's the home of the free, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like everything that I do embodies that. Like, I don't ever want to be boxed into a role.
Okay.
or even like your perception of me.
Okay.
Right? I don't even want to be boxed into whatever perception you have of me, right? Because as soon as I feel like you have a perception of me, then I want to change it just for fun. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, I'll give you, like, I was in college, so I played. I did end up walking onto the team my sophomore year in college, and so practice was at 7:00 in the morning. I went for like 2.5 hours, and I had to get there early because I was hurt, but I had a business class, and I'd show up it was like the first class of the day after practice, and I'd show up in my sweatsuit because that's what I was wearing from the thing. And,
Yeah.
hoodie, black guy, whatever, the whole 9 yards at a mostly white school. And I'd sit in the back of the class, and I was listening, and I was taking notes, and I was really interested in the class, got a really good grade, had a term paper, did really well in the term paper. It was about crisis management, actually. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I turned it in, and he thought I plagiarized it. And I think he thought I plagiarized it because he was like, "There's no way this guy could produce this." But I did, right? And I like that. I like the fact that, like, you can look at me and think that, like, you here comes the underdog, right? And then I just completely flip the script, and then all of a sudden you're the underdog, right? Like, I like that. I like that feeling. So as an entrepreneur, one of the things that I say is that, like, I don't want to be boxed in. I want the freedom to control my own time, to control my own money, to control the way that I'm actually spending my time.
Yeah.
And the other part of that drives me to success is that when I look back at the bosses that I've had, and I've been lucky enough to have, good bosses, right? And I've always gotten along with them. And I make it easy for them to get along with me, frankly, because it's not like I'm showing up way before they are. I'm leaving well after they leave, right?
Yeah.
and I'm working my butt off while I'm there, and I do it all with a smile on my face, right?
Yeah.
So although I've never been a good employee, never wanted to be an employee. I was a great employee, and probably because I was a great teammate. I understood teamwork. I played team sports since I was like 7. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but as a quote unquote boss, and I've managed people and I've led people here at my company, not now, but I want to be that inspirational boss that says, you know what, like you don't have to be a jerk to lead, right? You don't have to be hard or tough or any of that stuff to lead and to drive people, to motivate. And I figure the more success that I can acquire, so to speak, whatever that word
Sure.
means, then I have a higher perch, if you will, to shout from and say, look, the nice guys can do this too, right?
Yeah.
Nice guys can win too, right? You don't have to be the jerk. You can be the nice guy and still have it all, And
Yeah.
that's what I try to teach my kids too.
No, I love that. And I think that's something that, unfortunately, it's the way that we portray sort of the successful people in society, or the stories that you hear are the ones about, and I'll use Steve Jobs as an example, was not a very nice boss, right? And, I think that's really an important thing that you're doing, and focusing on that specifically. You've done a lot of things, like even when getting into real estate. You mentioned starting a magazine. You mentioned like you just laid down some bars. Like, where do all these interests come from? It sounds like you're just like interested in a lot of different things, like a lot of natural curiosity.
That's you just said the word, right? It's curiosity. And it's funny, like, so I have a 7, my daughter will be 7 in 10 days. My son will be 6 next month. I'm sorry, he'll be 5 next month. And I've had a very, I'm extremely passionate, obviously, about them. But I was listening to my daughter ask me a question the other day, and my wife she asked my wife a question, and then my wife asked her a question like, well, why are you asking these questions or something like that? And my daughter was like, I don't know. And I looked at my daughter and say, tell mommy, you want to ask those questions because you want to know the answers. Right? It's just that simple, right? Like you just,
Yeah.
and I want to make sure that I, to nurture that curiosity. And I think part of it is because, there's only like, I know this, you have the fintech focus here, and we'll get into that. But I think for me, time is more valuable than money in a lot of different ways. And I feel like I want to use up my time on earth and every single moment, not wasting it, right? Exploring, right? Like figuring out, not accepting that something is broken, and just because something's broken, it can't be fixed, right? Or it's that whole mentality of, and I want to teach my kids this. It's not necessarily, and I have taught my kids this. It's not necessarily like I can't. It's how can. You know what I mean? Like how can I? Not, I can't. It's how can I do this? Like, how can this be done? Right. And that's just always how I've been. So for instance, if I want passive income, right? There's all different types of ways you can build passive income. My answer is real estate, right? And if the answer is real estate, then that's what I'm going to do, right? There's not going to be like, oh, I don't have time. I don't have money. I don't have the knowledge. I don't have it. No, you just acquire the things that I just rattled off, and then you just go do the thing that you wanted to do. Right. If you like the magazine, really was just, you're incentivized by meeting women, to be honest with you. It was like, like, let's do a magazine that's kind of like, we'll put beautiful women on the cover, and then the inside will be for the guys, right? Like, right. And actually the outside's for the guys, right? So that's what that was all about. But at the same time, we wanted to make it big. We printed 10,000 copies. We were hustling around Boston. I had, one of my best friends and I were doing it. We're handing out the, just trying to drive demand, whatever the whole 9 yards. We printed a second issue, but then we ran out of money because we were just funding it by our credit cards, whatever the whole 9 yards. And so the creative side of me, right, is just always, it's just present no matter what, right? So when you talk about the hip hop and those types of things, right, I'm so fascinated by the language, right? I'm just so fascinated by the words and how people construct metaphors and just sort of everything that involves that stuff, right? That's why, like, even like just writing sales copy to me is fun, right? Like sending an email, it's like a craft for me. Like I labor over it. You know what I mean? Just everything, even just surrounding my podcast, like every little word, like the titles, everything matters to me, right? It always has. And so that's sort of where all that comes from. It's like, if it can be done, like if it's in my mind, I always say I have an allergic reaction to not taking action, right? So I can't necessarily have something sit there and then not do something about it, right? Now, it might not work, but I'm at least going to try it. And then it doesn't work. Okay, cool. I tried that and I'll move on, right? And that's just how I've always been.
Yeah. You know? No, I love that. Just following your interests, passions, try it. And that allergic to inaction, take action, allergic to inaction. It's great motivation and just motto to have.
Yeah.
Why don't we pivot into J. David Group? So you end up starting J. David. What's been that process like building it up?
So I started the J. David Group on March 14th, 2011. I remember it vividly because I actually, in order to leave the previous company, there was a year non-compete. And so what I decided to do with that year, at least I thought I was going to do, is I was going to work for a different firm. It was an executive search firm, really boutique executive search firm. So somebody, by the way, speaking of bosses, who was easily the worst boss, and I'll even say one of the worst human beings I've ever encountered in my life. We won't go any more personal than that. But I basically only lasted there for about 90 days. By the way, closed what I needed to close, right? Because I committed. I'm like, okay, cool. We're looking for a VP of product. I did that. I said, listen, after I'm done with this, I'm out. We're like fire and ice. I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
And that was that. So that was on March 11th is when I said peace to him. And I was already setting all the stuff up on the back end, right? Website, the whole 9 yards. And then March 14th, it was time, right?
Yeah.
Non-compete was still in place. Unemployment rate was 9.5%. That's going to look like great in a couple of months from now, right? But when I started, before all this COVID thing, just to put it in perspective, the unemployment rate was somewhere around 3.4%. Right. So anyways, when I started, the unemployment rate was 9.5%. I remember telling my fiance, I don't know. Yeah, I guess we were engaged at the time. My fiance, I told her, I said, here's the deal. And Rocky's my favorite movie, all the Rockies, especially Rocky 4. But I'm like, listen, we were living in an apartment at the time. I go, we're going to have a Rocky Adrian conversation in the reverse. Like, I'm coming to you. And I just want to put this all out there. And here's the deal. Like we weren't married yet, right? We were refusing to put the wedding on credit cards. We wanted to pay it all cash. We needed money to go on the honeymoon. We wanted to buy a house, whatever, all happening within like the next year. I mean, I quit that job 3 months before our wedding and it wasn't, not all the money was in the bank. All right. So it wasn't in the bank and we weren't putting it on credit cards. And it was a New Jersey wedding. It cost like over $30,000, whatever, the whole nine. So I was like, here's the deal. I'm going to be fighting the world right now. I'm going to be fighting that guy that I just left. I'm going to be fighting the demons of the company that I had a great run with. And they're going to be like, what a jerk. I can't believe, not a jerk, but like, why would he leave this such a great opportunity? Like, I don't understand it. He's making the wrong move. I had to fight that negative energy. I had to fight my competition. I had to fight any self-doubt that I was going to creep into my mind. And I said to my wife, Carrie, I was like, the one thing that I don't want to fight is your fear, if you will, right? Like your trepidation about what I'm going to embark upon. Yeah. So I need you to know that everything is going to be okay. We'll figure it out. I'll work it out. We'll be fine. And I'm telling you, man, like, I don't know what it is about me when I'm in the eye of the storm, but the last thing I am is afraid or stressed. I'm just not. That's just not my personality. I don't know what it is. It has something to do with my upbringing. But I wasn't scared. I wasn't stressed. I just went about my business. And I had two contacts initially. Actually, one of them was one of my wife's good friends from high school. Her husband was a VP of sales at a consulting firm. Okay. And he needed salespeople. And as a matter of fact, there's a copy of the check right behind me in that little in that frame. In that frame, $7,800 was the first check that I got on June 1st, 2011. And then somebody else that was a candidate of mine at the previous company that I needed to have that I had the non-compete with became a client at just some other company that didn't interfere with my non-compete. And he was like, hey, we need salespeople. Can you help us? And I'm like, yeah. So I started recruiting for those two people, literally like on March 14th, like the first day. So then it was like, okay, now I got to go find these candidates. And I just worked and found them. And so it's funny, man, like looking back at it, it's like to think that, and sometimes I'll remind my wife of this too. It's like, you realize that I've been on 100% commission for 9 years running. Like there's no, yeah, it's just all out there, right? Just finding the money. So I had this vision when I first started that I was going to build it to something scalable, right? I was going to scale it up and I was going to build it to a certain revenue number, and then I was going to sell it for a multiple. It was going to be a 4x multiple, right? 4 or 5x multiple, right?
Okay.
Studied all the stuff that I needed to study, figured all this stuff out. And so I had 4 or 5 people reporting to me here. I had an offshore team of about 8 people. So I had like 12 people sort of rolling up to me, had an office. But the challenge is that people weren't running as fast as I wanted them to run, essentially, right? Some were, and we were doing okay, but not as well as I envisioned that if I could deliver a certain revenue personally, all I needed was 4 or 5 other people to do the same thing that I was doing. That would get us to the revenue goal that I wanted. Yeah. That would get me to my multiple. Because of my right brain personality, at some point I knew I would be bored, and I was like, okay, cool, let me move on to do something else, right? And so that didn't happen. I had some people left on their own. Some people I had to talk to and say, you know what, this probably isn't a good thing. And then I realized at the end of the day, this is like literally within the last like year or so. Yeah. Because there was somebody else that was just my right arm, and he was fantastic. This guy, Sonny, who did a great job. But I was like, he ended up going on the corporate side of recruiting, rather working for a company. Yeah. We had a bad year. And I decided, you know what, it's not worth the effort to build something up and have personnel and have people managing, having people to manage, because it doesn't necessarily even fit with who I am at the core. Even though I like to lead and inspire, it doesn't really free me up to do, there's that word free, right? Yeah. Now all of a sudden my time isn't necessarily mine. It's like, okay, what's this person doing? What's this person doing? And so that's why I decided to scale it all back and then have it be me, you know?
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And it's interesting to go through that progression where you're like, all right, I'm going to definitely sell this thing. This is the game plan. And then, throughout the years, learning what you like, what you don't like, what works for you. I mean, I think that's incredible to have that self-awareness and then also be able to like make that pivot.
That's right.
Really impressive. So how did that exactly happen? Like at what point were you like, okay, this just isn't working? Because obviously on the employee side, you use the term unboss yourself. So you were unboss yourself. You were in at 4, 5, 6 in the morning. And then, manager comes in later and you're still there when they leave at 9 o'clock at night. Mm-hmm. So is that sort of like what happened in reverse, if that makes sense?
I'd like to say that was sort of strategic, if you will. Okay. But it really wasn't. It was almost like a death of 1,000 cuts, Okay. It was just kind of like, I could feel, I'm bad at breaking up too, by the way, right? Like I'm just not, I think I broke up once with one girlfriend ever. I didn't have that many, by the way, and even that was because we were going to college, frankly. And it was kind of the out. It was, you know what I mean? So even that wasn't so rough. Right. Yeah. So when I've had people on my team, it was kind of like, maybe they'll just asphyxiate themselves, right? Like maybe they'll stop making money. They'll realize that it's time to go. Who knows? But I think for me, it was like the love just wasn't there anymore. It was just kind of like, I didn't have the same energy. I didn't look forward to, doing my craft and working and that type of stuff, right? Because I felt like I was just too much pulling people along to sort of get them to go to certain places and to work to a certain level or to focus on certain things, and then, so that's one part of it, like just the human part of it and the struggle. The other side of it, I think too, is just, like financially, right? Like I'm looking and going, we're making all this money, but then I'm paying it all. And by the way, everybody was, for the most part, except for the people that were offshore, which I was paying hourly, everybody was basically on a 100% commission, right? So it wasn't like I was paying them necessarily. Like they were just essentially paying themselves, right? Which, because I'm a risk taker, but I didn't want to necessarily, I can risk and put money and invest money in process and systems and stuff like that, and software and technology. I can't, I was reluctant to risk it in human effort, I guess, if you will, right? Because I wasn't really sure what the outcome was going to be. Sure. But I was paying for all of their, software licenses and frankly, their support, their offshore support. Like I was paying humans to basically help my other humans, right? Yeah. And I had it as a 2-to-1 ratio. That's why there were 8 people offshore and 4 people onshore. Yeah. And so I was supporting people that I didn't really feel like I needed to, that I was really inclined to support in some cases, Okay. And so that's what it was. And then some people just, it wasn't for them. And, but they, even before I even like I wanted them on my team, and it
Yeah.
always happens that way too, right? The best people, but it wasn't necessarily for them. Or in one instance, this one woman started her own, recruiting thing, which was interesting. It only lasted a year, but it's another story. But
Yeah.
so it's so there was just all different types of reasons. But like I said, it was really just like it wasn't really one strategic thing that I was like, okay, this is
Yeah.
happening. It just sort of petered out on its own, and then I made the strategic decision to not build anything back up, right? To not necessarily go and look for
Yeah.
other people. One other thing too that I guess I'll say that I think you'll find interesting. I'm not sure if we talked about this offline or not, but because I have such an itch for just doing things.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that like writing emails for me is really a craft and an art and stuff when I'm writing sales messaging. So I followed that sort of thread, if you will. And while all of this was going on, recruiting and building all the Jay David group, I actually created a software tool called Email Force at first. I changed it to Follow Up Fuel. Frankly, because there was just a fight over the people that I ended up launching it with. It ended up being a disaster, but I had to rebrand it in the whole 9 yards. And we did an affiliate. We launched with an affiliate strategy. I got over 2,000 customers within like 5.5 days.
Wow.
Grossed over $100,000 in 5 days. I had, but basically it was a follow up. It was basically email templates for online marketers, for digital marketers, right? People that are driving ads to landing pages and selling ebooks and digital solutions and those types of things, right? Online courses. And so all this was going on in the Jay David group. I wasn't sleeping at some points. I was up hours and hours just like working, building this thing, like paying developers and UX guys and all over the world basically, and just trying. And there was so many different versions of it, and spending a whole bunch of money on it, and like starting over and then spending more money and then starting over again, and trying to find my niche in the whole 9 yards. And that went on literally for like 3 years, right? While I was still running the Jay David group, right? And then at the end of the day, I realized it just wasn't worth it from an economics perspective. It was like, wait a minute. When I look at time for dollars, it's like what I'm doing now is the founder of the Jay David group and recruiting the way I do. It's just exponentially different. But so that's one of those things where I got an itch and I was like, okay, well, you know what? If I want to create this thing, I'm not letting anything get in my way. I'll just create it, right? So I called up developers, just was on it, called up copywriters, the whole 9 yards, and just sort of figured it out.
That's awesome. Wow. Yeah. Being able to juggle those two things and like build a tool like that has that sort of just instantaneous success in one respect is pretty incredible.
Yeah. Exhausting too.
Yeah. Oh, I can only imagine. So Jay, how do you define success? Like, what does success look like for you?
Good question. It's funny. I remember I came up with a definition for success when I was in college. I think I was a sophomore in college. And success to me then still remains the same now, which is that finding something I love to do while having the reverence of others for doing it, right?
Okay.
For really loving what I'm doing and then having people admire me, frankly, for doing it, right? That's as just sort of hokey as that sounds. To me, it's really very simple, right? Because if I'm not doing that, then I'm not successful. I don't define it by a certain amount of money in the bank. I don't define it by certainly material things like houses and cars or vacations. And I guess to take that a step further, I will say that it is being able to essentially do whatever I want with my time and have there be no detriment to whatever that is that I'm spending my time doing. So for instance, like if I want to just go downstairs right now and play basketball with my kids, there's not going to be any financial impact, calamity on that at all, right? I'm not going to get fired. I'm still going to be able to pay the bills. Like, everything's good, right? And so for me, if I could live the rest of my life in that way, right? Without having the fear that however I'm spending my time or whatever it is that I'm doing at any moment is going to be to the detriment of something else financially or otherwise, like losing, the big things like the house and all that stuff, then to me, that's the definition of success.
Yeah. No, I like that. And it ties back into what you were saying about the drive, right? You said that when you were 5 years old, you wanted to become an NBA star because you wanted your dad's attention, and that was important. And getting that reverence, that admiration, it makes sense. It all
Right. Yeah.
ties together.
Good point. Yeah. There's no question. There's no question. It's like, you know what? Look at me. I'm happy. I'm doing it. You can do it
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, if someone wanted to follow in your footsteps, they had similar drive, wanted to start their own thing, what advice would you give to someone that was just starting out?
Somebody that's just starting out, and I tell my little brother this all the time, is that you have to really learn as much as you possibly can about whatever it is that you want to learn about, right? But
Okay.
you don't want to learn so much that you're not doing anything, right? Like you want to, I have an acronym for that. It's called LAID, LAID, right? And it's learn, act, iterate, and duplicate, right? And what I mean by that is that you learn whatever it is you want to learn. As soon as you learn just even one little piece, then go act on that little piece, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Right. If it's writing email, learn how to write an email. Okay. Or what's like great subject lines, let's just say, or headlines or something like that. Right. Then just go and send out that email with the subject lines and start testing them out. Right.
Yeah.
If it's buying a house with no money down, buying real estate with no money down, right? Learn whatever that is, right? And there's a lot of different ways, right? Learn whatever that is and then go do it. You don't need any money to do it, right? That's the whole thing, right? So it's like, what else or what are you waiting for? The only other obstacle in that case, I guess, is time and knowledge, right? Yeah. So if you feel like you don't have enough knowledge, get it, but don't wait too long because you're really going to learn while you're acting. Because that's how I learn best, is to act, right? I'm a glutton for punishment in that way because I learn a lot and it's a lot of failure that happens that way, but you end up, learning, right? That's the ultimate goal, right? And then iterate, because once you've acted and you realize that you've screwed up or something didn't go as planned, right? Then you're going to change it. Like, okay, well, what did I just do wrong there? Let me analyze this. Let me look at it really carefully. I'm not going to do that anymore. Here's what I did right. And I'm going to go build on that. And that's really the duplicate part to it, right? As soon as you figure out what you've done right, then you want to duplicate it. Like, so for instance, going back to the people that I had on my team for the Jay David group, I learned when it was just me, the first thing I was going to do was I was going to document all the processes that I was going through, right? Like the tools that I was using, how long I would literally know like how long it would take me to find somebody on LinkedIn and then put them into the applicant tracking system. It was something like 6 minutes or something like that, right? I knew the analytics behind how many new candidates I needed to put into the system, and then how many candidates I needed to send an email to in order to hit the other metrics that were important to me, right? To get the send outs, to get the interviews, to get the hires, right? Yeah. And so once I figured all that out, and I use tools to do that, right? Analytics tools and all this other stuff. And once I figured that out, then I was duplicating it, right? I'm like, okay, cool. Now I know I'm going to put Sonny in the same position. I'm going to give him the same information, and then I'm going to give him to support. So if 40 was a minimal number, then we needed 80 in order to do 80. So Sonny could focus on whatever he's really good at. And I'm going to have the VAs focus on just the sourcing to funnel all the information into Sonny. And so basically I just duplicated that over and over and over again. Right. And obviously there's bottlenecks in that, which is why I'm not sitting on some sort of like huge organization right now. Right. But the point is that that's what I advise people to do, which is just to not just sit there and obsessively learn, but then act on it and then figure it out from there. And then just one other strategic point that I guess I'll make is that I feel like a lot of people are afraid to start and do something, especially if it's starting their own business, right? Real estate and investing is something different, but when it comes to starting your own business and doing your own thing. Yeah. And a lot of people will start off by offering some sort of a professional service, right? Because you're not really going, maybe people aren't building a technology, or maybe they don't have enough money to pay for the technology to be built, and maybe they're not going to raise money. So they're going to offer some sort of professional service, let's just say. But whatever it is, even if you're selling technology, great. But I heard Dharmesh Shah, one of the co-founder of HubSpot, say many, many years ago that if he was starting out a business, and I still think this applies, and frankly, speaking of podcasts, this plays right into it, which is to start a blog, right? Or start a podcast, or start something where you're publishing on a regular basis to people who want to know about whatever the subject matter is that you are an expert on, that you want to start monetizing, right? And if you do that and he said, do it for a year. So while you're doing that for a year and you're building up your audience while you're doing that, and let's say if at the end of the year you have maybe, I don't know, maybe you have 1,000 people on an email list or something like that, right? And you have let's say 100 of those people are engaged, or maybe even 50 of those people are engaged, more likely, right? And let's just say that out of those 50, you get a couple of customers as a result of that, right? That's enough really to make you feel comfortable that you have a solution that people are showing that they see value in, right?
Yeah.
And that they're willing to pay, right? So you validated your hypothesis, I guess, if you will, in terms of what you were going to sell and take to market. You have money in the bank as a result of that. And then you feel a little bit better about, okay, now I can go out and I can duplicate what I just did. So now it's not just 1,000 people on my email list, it's 2,000 people and so forth. And all of a sudden, before you know it, you have a real business. And that doesn't mean that you go out and quit your job until you know that you're in a sustainable place. And that's what I would do, right? Don't be afraid. Learn, act, iterate, duplicate, and then also build up your business just by publishing information on multimedia. And then you'll realize, okay, if nobody's engaging, you don't have a business, right? And nobody's buying, you don't have a business. Then keep going until maybe you figure it out and you find something else, or maybe you pivot and you go do something else.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. You know, if you could have the best product in the world, but if no one's interested in it or doesn't know about it, it doesn't matter. So spending that year really honing your messaging and all that stuff makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Love that.
That's right.
How would you describe your relationship with money, Jay?
Elusive. No. Every time I want more, it moves. I think my relationship with money is, it's risky. Let's just say. And what I mean by that is that, like, I'll put a lot of money at risk to see if it comes back, right? Or and wait for it to come back, right? So what I mean by that is that I'm frugal when it comes to consuming things, right? Like you see, here's a piece of a Bose headphones that I got many years ago, and probably like 7 or 8 years ago, that I spent $300 for. And it was a painful $300 that I spent, but I rationalized it by saying, well, if I have it for 10 years, it's like $30 a year, right? I didn't quite get to 10 years, but you know, it served the purpose, and I'll spend money on utility rather than anything else, right? So I just spent over $1,500 on an in-ground basketball hoop, right? Why? Well, because it's utility to me for any number of different reasons, right? And it'll be here with the house forever. It's not going anywhere, right? Yeah. And I need my kids to have something else to do. They like basketball because I love basketball, and we all love basketball, and that's something to do. But I will refuse to go out and spend money on, I don't know, anything else really, like clothes, or you know, anything like fancy cars or just vacations. All that stuff just doesn't. So I love money, right? My relationship with money is I love money, right? And I love it so much that sometimes you put it out there to risk, which is why I invest in real estate. Some real estate has worked out, some real estate has not worked out, right? And so, I guess the short answer is I love money, but I will certainly, I'm not afraid to risk it either. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting though, because you mentioned risk, but at the same time, there's an opportunity. As you said, there's utility, there's a potential return. And in some respect, is that more risky or less risky than just buying some sort of consumable product that you don't really care about?
Yeah, the funny thing is that I do think it's more risky.
Okay.
Because here's why. Because I've thought about this a lot.
Okay.
And here's why. Because buying a consumer product, again, going back to like that uncle who, 9 to 5, whatever, it's kind of like, once you buy that consumer product, it's over with. You don't even remember how much you paid for it. I do because I'm frugal, right? So I know, but it's like, but you don't really think about, like my wife wouldn't, right? You don't think about how much you paid for it. And once you've paid for it, as long as you're not putting on credit cards, though, of course, right? If you don't put everything on credit cards, then of course it's going to add up. But if you're just buying it, it's a one-off thing, then that's it. It's done. If you make a bad investment, like real estate, and you end up losing that investment, that's something that you think about and stays with you for a long period of time.
True.
Right? So that's why,
Okay. No, it makes sense. It makes sense. Speaking of investments, what would you say is the best investment that you've made?
best investment I made was probably the 2-family house that I bought about a mile from where we live now, in 2014. And I say it was the best investment because it was the house I grew up in. My late great aunt, who bought it for my mother 2 months before I was born in 1975, for like just under $60,000, left it to my mother.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, and I anticipated this, that she was going to sell it, right? She shouldn't have, in my opinion, but she was going to sell it. And she was like, and she was going to wholesale it. Like, she was going to sell it at wholesale, not retail. This is 2014.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay. I decided to buy it with my wife, and it was the best investment we've ever made, because it's just, I mean, we're talking value. The value is just, it's I'm laughing basically, inside and outside. Just amazing, right? And it wasn't a family discount either, by the way. I mean, she sold it to me, but she was going to sell it to the wholesale guy for. Just out of a lack of knowledge, more than anything. Right? Just out of a lack of knowledge. And okay, cool. So yeah, I'd say that was the best investment. And in the house that we bought here as well, I think my own house, I think, was a really good investment too as well. But I think that was more of just timing and that type of thing, I guess. Although, you know what? I'm going to give myself a little bit more credit than that, because I think that the real estate that I bought in the past informed me of really what to focus on, where to look, and the right questions to ask, and then how to negotiate, because we did have to negotiate.
Yeah.
My real estate agent thought my offer was like, she didn't want to make it, and I made it. They didn't accept it, but they accepted something much less than what was going to happen, So
sure,
I'd say those are my best investments.
Gotcha. Yeah. Do you mind sharing some of the things that you learned specifically through the real estate that you bought previously?
Yeah. So just one simple thing is that, when you're walking through a house, so some of the houses that I bought in the past were basically like pre-foreclosure, where I had to do a short sale, or the person had to sell it to me, right? And I had to do all the paperwork, negotiating with Countrywide. It was like painful. I'm not a paperwork person at all. I hate it. I detest it. So that was just bad. It was like, thick, like bureaucracy, right?
Yeah.
But asking questions, just asking a simple question like, why is the house for sale? I mean, that right there, when we bought this house, the house was for sale because the people were going through a divorce. Now, in my mind, because of all the stuff that I had learned in the past, I knew that meant that, financially, and right, from your own personal experience, right?
Yeah.
Financially, like, there's something happening here, and there's room for a buyer to, alleviate your immediate pain and get a deal at the same time, right? And so that's something that simple happened. But then also, because I grew up in this city, I knew where the neighborhoods were that I wanted to live in. There was really only 2 neighborhoods, areas of the city that I really desired to live in, right? For several reasons. And so I focused on that. I knew what size house I wanted. I knew just everything about that. And so just and again, going back just from my own real estate experience, knowing what to be looking for, I think, is more than half the battle, and then knowing the market. So those types of things. And then lastly, not being afraid to make a lower, like the house, the offer was $50,000 less than what they were asking, basically, Most people think that's insulting, like my real estate agent, my wife, whatever, but the whole 9 yards, but they can just say no, So I did, and we met, ended up with $25,000 less, but which was unheard of. I mean, for the longest time. Right. And so yeah, those are the 2 main things that I think that I learned. And I learned from a lot of my mistakes too, as well, which is,
Well, speaking of mistakes, what's dumbest money mistake that you've made in the past?
How about buying a house sight unseen about 1,200 miles away?
That is, that's pretty risky.
Yeah, it was easily the dumbest mistake I ever made, financially. And that, going back to my dad, right? So my dad was living. So remember I said my father he moved far away when I was 11.
Yeah.
So he did. He moved from Boston to Atlanta, or Marietta, but it's a suburb of Atlanta, and for work, essentially. And so I think, and maybe this comes into what I was saying about like what motivates me and whatever, but he was down there and he's really handy, right? He was essentially turning apartments and turning houses, fixing up kitchens and baths and stuff like that, and found a house that was inexpensive, right? I was living up here in Boston. I didn't have enough money to buy investment property up here. Bought it down there for like $72,000 or something like that, which is so much less expensive. It was 2-bedroom, 1 bath, and it needed work. So I was like, okay, cool, Dad, I'll buy it. Right? I think it was 25, something like that, right? Bought it, didn't see it. He faxed me a picture of it basically from the listing sheet, right? And I was like, yeah, and I trusted him. I'm like, okay, cool, Long story short, we put somebody in there. I mistakenly, just like an idiot, I didn't know why I did this, but they were renting it for like $600 a month. Randomly, when it was up, I'm like, let's just raise it to $650 or $700. They're like, we're out of here. So I'm like, oh no, now I have a vacant property down there. I don't know what to do with it. So I put my sister in it. My sister, whatever you see from me, do the 180. That's my sister, right?
Okay.
So 180, right? So 7.5 years or so, she was in there. Didn't pay me at all. No rent money, right?
Yeah.
Nothing, not a dime. So I was just paying a mortgage on that place, right?
Ugh.
Meanwhile, the property was devaluing because she was just destroying it, right? With her kids and just her abusive boyfriend or whatever, right? It was just a mess to the point where I went down there. And I'd been down there, obviously periodically throughout the years, but at one point at the end, I had to go down there and they were living in squalor. I mean, it was bad. There was no electricity going to the place anymore because they weren't paying for it anymore. Because her man was handy. He was able to rig it so that the electric would work, but then they took the box off the house. I mean, it was bad. It was really, really bad.
Wow.
And I eventually, this was around 2008, 2009. At some point I said, all right, like I had been with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, for about 7.5 years or something like that. I knew she wanted to get married. I was finally starting to come around to the fact that, okay, maybe I should want to get married. and part of the reason why I was taking so long is because if I was going to take all these financial risks, I didn't want to come down like, you're with your parents, right? I didn't want, if we were to get a divorce, I didn't want it to be about money, right? That was just the one thing that wasn't going to be about, right? It could be about anything else, wasn't going to be about money. And so I was just like, nope, until I get my stuff together, I'm not doing it. Right. So then finally I was like, all right, I think it's time, but I had to let this house go. So I'm like, all right, I'm not paying the mortgage anymore. I'm just going to let it go. And I was racking up credit card debt too at the time because I was spending all my money trying to fix up the house. Right. Like something simple, like getting the appliance, like buying appliances and, getting the house, just a mess. Right. Yes, my father's handy, but did he do anything to the house? No, just didn't do anything, right? Just because he knew I wasn't going to pay him, and he had other paying gigs that he had, right? So it didn't work. So I had to let it go. Went to foreclosure. This was back in like 2010. And so that's my point when I was saying earlier about like learning from your mistakes. It's like, sometimes the best investments are the investments that you don't make, right? And I made that investment, and I ended up, talking about like, we were talking about like what's more risky, right? That's something that I paid for over and over and over again with high interest rates and not being able to buy more stuff. And, so all those things really it was painful,
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. No, thanks for opening up about that. I mean, definitely a learning lesson, and I'm glad that you've been able to apply that and to your future stuff, but definitely painful for sure.
And my wife has much better credit than I do, so that helps.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So, Jay, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing everyday Americans when it comes to finances?
I think it's something that's not as direct as a money answer, but I think it's really about a mentality, which is discipline.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people spend the money that they don't have or spend money before they get it. I think that I've been caught up in that too. Like, for instance, just as that house, like, was it really the right time to buy that house? Probably not, looking back. Yeah. Was it even investing in the software that I was telling you about before? And it wasn't a whole heck of a lot of money, but, still I was spending money, putting money on my credit cards because I was using the cash from the Jay David group just to live and, just so to go on with our lives, right? And I wasn't going to raise money for that because I just don't want to do that, right? It's almost like having a boss to me in a way, right? Yeah. So I'm just like, I'll just put it on credit cards, and I did. But was that the right thing to do? In other words, should I have just waited to in other words, should I have just taken money from the Jay David group, which I was using money from the Jay David group as well, but should I use money for the Jay David group, set it aside, and then spend money on this, invest in the software and all of that stuff, but I wasn't. I was putting it on credit cards, and that can be really stressful when it's like, okay, well, when does the money start to come in, right? And it didn't come in at the end. Then I just had to start using this money to pay off the credit cards, right? And I think that's part of my, even though I'm frugal when it comes to business and risk, it's I'm impatient with success in some ways. So even if I don't have all the money in the bank, let's just say at the time, it's like, you know what, this is an investment. I'll spend the money because I believe that, on my sales ability, my marketing ability, that this will start rolling back in as well anyways. So it's not that big of a deal. But I think when it comes to consumerism, I think a lot of people, where they get in trouble is they see something and they want something, whether it's we were going to buy a $5,000 dog. I'll just say this, right? Before the coronavirus, right? Like we were leaning towards it, right? Or starting to do the research. It's a Burma doodle, right? Which is a combination of a Burmese mountain dog and a poodle, right?
Okay.
The reason for it is we had a dog for 16 years. I told my daughter 3 years ago that when she was 7, that we would get her a dog. Okay, fine, great. But my wife doesn't want to clean up all the fur, and we needed a dog that doesn't shed, right? So this particular dog, based on their demeanor and all the research we did, was the dog that there was consensus, right? I didn't care, I'd get any dog, but my wife wanted this dog, right? And then my daughter ended up wanting this dog. And then when the coronavirus hits, I go, okay, like, could we buy it? Yes, still, yeah, we could, but is it smart? No, right? So I'm like, okay, we're gonna hold off on that, right? Let's just not do it. We were gonna go to Disney World. Like we were literally probably like a week or two away from plunking down over $10,000 to go to Disney World sometime in the fall, right?
Yeah.
We had a family over previously who had gone to Disney World. They're experts on it, whatever, the whole 9 yards. And, Carrie and I were like, okay, should we do it? Like, are we ready? And I'm like, yeah, might as well. Let's just do it, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden this hit and I go, let's hold off, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by the discipline, right? In other words, financially, as it exists in this moment, could we do that? Yes, of course. We could buy the dog, we could buy Disney World, whatever, the whole 9 yards, right? But does it really need to happen now? And the answer is no, right? I mean, again, I don't know when this thing's going to turn around from a headhunting perspective, right? Like companies aren't hiring at nearly the rate they were hiring before, right? Like my business is really quiet. And because I've had so many ups and downs, I've been smart enough to basically put myself in a position where, okay, fine, 2 or 3 quarters goes by and I don't make any more money. Okay, that's fine. Like I'm cool with that. Like nothing's going to change, right? But if it's 4 quarters, 5 quarters, then it's like 6 quarters, right? Then what do we got to do? We got to start selling investment property. We got to tap into real, like savings, like all that other things. And I just don't want to do that, right? And so that's what I mean by discipline. Like you just have to be disciplined and tell yourself no. And I think a lot of times people make the mistake of spending money before they have it. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, they're in this big credit card calamity and it's hard to get out of. Unless you're a really good salesperson, because I've been in like these situations where I'm like, oh my God, I got so much debt. But because I've always been able to sell my way out of, like I literally will generate whatever the income is needed to get myself back to wherever I need to be and go from there,
Yeah. No, that's awesome that you've been able to do that. You've been able to use your skills, your sales skills to be able to get yourself out of those situations. But yeah, I mean, the discipline piece is key. Is key with finances. It's key with everything, right?
Absolutely. That's right. Yep, it is everything. Right. I mean, running the business, starting the business, like thinking, like everything, looking for a job, like everything is discipline. And if you're not ready to put in, if you don't have that discipline, it's going to be really, really tough.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jay, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you sitting down and telling your story. Done some incredible things, and I love some of the things that you said, like LAID and using some of these different philosophies and applying it to your life. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, this has been great. I love sitting on the other side of the mic and telling my story. So
yeah, different feeling, isn't it? Yeah,
that's right. It is.
So Jay, I'll leave you with the last word. And please tell the audience how they can find you, subscribe to the podcast if they are looking for salespeople or they are a salesperson looking for career change. Yeah, please take the floor.
Absolutely. So they can find me on LinkedIn. Of course, it's under Jay Webb with 2 B's. You can also, if you want to schedule a call and just talk, you can either use two pages. You can go to the jdavidgroup.com/hiring if you're looking to hire great talent, or go to the jdavidgroup.com/looking if you're looking for another career opportunity. And then, of course, my podcast over Quota can be found anywhere you get podcasts, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, whole nine.
Awesome. Well, perfect, Jay. Thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Much appreciated, man.
All right. So that concludes today's conversation with Jay Webb, founder of J. David Group, and of course, host of the Quota podcast. Now, what I really loved about today's conversation was just the philosophies that Jay gives, both actionable ones in terms of LAID, his acronym for how you should take action, as well as just like going deep into what motivates him and drives him, and having heard that he's taken the time to really introspect and figure out what it is that drives him. What is that motivation? Even though he no longer seeks the attention of his father, which is what had motivated him and drove him early when he was a child and kind of growing up into his early adulthood, to now just wanting to have an impact on the world and have people recognize him for the great things that he does. So I think it's really, really telling, and something that if you have not done, take some time to really think about what motivates and drives you. And if you don't know where to start, that's okay, but just start maybe writing stuff down, or just kind of analyzing why you make decisions or why you want to do certain things. So anyway, really, really great conversation with Jay. And of course, if you found value or you think someone else that you know would, please share the podcast with others, and make sure that you follow and subscribe if you have not already. And that's it for the Silicon Alley podcast. Thank you so much for watching. It means the world to me that you took the time to listen, and I hope that you got a ton of value from today's conversation. That's it. I'm William Glass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and of course, your host of the Silicon Alley podcast. Have a great one, guys.
You got no time to waste, but still you hesitate.